How's it going, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be reviewing this 2022 Toyota GR86 behind me. But before we get into today's review, definitely be sure to leave a like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff down below. It really helps me out a lot as a smaller YouTuber. And also, I do have to give a quick shout out to Sandstone Toyota on Route 1 North in Avenel, New Jersey. They've done nothing but support the channel. I've worked with them in the past. They're helping me today, giving me this brand new GR86 for you guys. So definitely go check them out. And if you're in the Central or North Jersey area and you're looking for a new Toyota, I definitely highly suggest them. Now that we got that out of the way, today again we have in front of us a 2022 Toyota GR86 finish off in a Truno blue factory color. I honestly absolutely love this factory paint color, and throughout this review I will be comparing this to the Subaru BRZ for at least a few options. And one of the things that I do want to touch on before we go into deeper detail about the car is the design differences between the GR86 and the Subaru BRZ. So the first one, which is probably the most noticeable one, is the front grille here. The front grille on the GR86 is much wider, and these little side vents, the whole design is just a little bit more aggressive. I also believe the headlights are different as well when compared to the Subaru BRZ. Also, the wheels are a little bit different with the options that you have. We're going to get into that with more detail in just a minute here. But also moving on to the rear, we actually have a little duckbill spoiler that doesn't really come on those Subaru BRZs from factory. I think it's a nice touch to this car. I know some cars look ugly with the duckbill and some look good. I think this is one of those cars that definitely look good with that duckbill spoiler in the rear. Also, I think this little rear valance slash diffuser is different on the Subaru BRZ as well, but I'm not quite sure. It could very well be the same or very similar to the new BRZ. Now, moving on to the wheels, I know I did just say that Toyota and Subaru do offer different options for these wheels, but on this GR86 specifically, we have a 17-inch alloy wheel, and the tires are the same all the way around. And the tires are actually 215 by 45 R17s, and they are Michelin tires. I wasn't really able to make out the model of the Michelin tires, but they do seem pretty sticky. Obviously they are all seasons though. Now, probably the main difference between this new GR86 and the BRZ comes in the suspension components. Now, Toyota advertises McPherson style struts in the front of this new GR86 with a double wishbone suspension in the rear, and I say that with air quotes because it's not really like a true double wishbone suspension. I'm going to leave the link on top of the video right here for a video where I specifically compare the two suspensions of the new BRZ to the new GR86. But it actually turns out that the two cars have completely different rear subframes, and it has to do with a mounting point to one of the suspension components in the rear. I don't know if it's like a sway bar or if it's one of the links. I'm not quite sure. But in this GR86, it's more of like a multi-link suspension, even though Toyota kind of advertises it as a double wishbone. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Also, anyone who has driven both of these cars say that the BRZ handles a lot more comfortably than the Toyota. However, on lap times, the Toyota has consistently outperformed the BRZ, coming even like a full second quicker than the BRZ on the same exact track. But if you want the simplified version of the difference between the two and how they handle, the Subaru has tighter suspension in the front with like a looser rear, whereas the Toyota is a little bit looser, or has like a little bit looser springs, I believe, in the front, and it has a tighter rear. So the Toyota is typically a little bit more oversteery and snappy when driving, which I'm sure is fun if you want to hoon around, do donuts with it, with that limited slip differential that it has in the rear. However, the Subaru BRZ is a little bit more tame and controlled when compared to this GR86. But now, actually coming around and popping the hood on this new GR86, we can see the 2.4 liter 4-cylinder double over cam D45 Boxer Subaru engine. Now, I've always said ever since the BRZ, the 86, as well as the Scion FRS initially started production, that these cars are essentially Subaru vehicles, except Scion when they were making them, and now Toyota, just Toyota alone. The other manufacturers just try to add their own little tweaks. So this is basically going to be the same exact thing as the Subaru BRZ. Everything is pretty much Subaru underneath this hood for the most part. This boxer engine does produce a peak 228 horsepower and 184 foot-pounds of torque, and it is still, you know, naturally aspirated with this new generation. I know a lot of people, when this new generation first came out, like last year or a couple of years ago now, everyone wanted, you know, a turbo variant of it. But unfortunately, I guess that it just didn't make sense for the manufacturers, and I understand where they're going with it, you know, trying to keep the car like a more of like a purist driver's car. But I definitely think that, you know, if you guys own one of these and you want to sneak a little bit more power out of it reliably, there's plenty of bolt-on you know, turbo kits that will fit right in this engine bay. There's actually a decent amount of room for that, despite it being a smaller, you know, engine bay fitting in that boxer engine. Now, I'm also almost certain that this Toyota GR86 actually does have a different trans than the Subaru, although I am not entirely sure. Unfortunately, I wasn't really able to find that out, but I think someone commented on one of the you know, older videos that I did comparing the two, and they said that the transes are actually different. But as we're going to see in a second, and kind of unfortunately, this one actually is an automatic, so you do have the 6-speed automatic transmission. So today I'm going to kind of be looking at it through that lens and seeing if, you know, getting one of these new with an automatic is just as good, if not arguably better if you're dailying it, than getting it with a manual trans. But yeah, now actually hopping in the interior, I honestly really like this interior. For the most part, it's going to be exactly the same, or very similar to the BRZ's interior. All this center stuff right here is pretty much exactly the same. And then to start it, since this is, you know, an automatic, I believe actually the manuals have the start stop button right here as well, but we're starting it, and you have this nice electronical display. And then if you actually push this button here, this is track mode, and that switches it over to a different display. So you just have kind of like your RPMs right there. You have a G-force meter to the side. You can also scroll through the different options, and it can give you like a lap timer on the side, and oil cooler, or oil temp, I guess I should say, and a bunch of other things that is just really cool. And if we actually do that and kind of scroll through some of the different options, yeah, you also have a volt reader for your batteries. That is just regular coolant temp. And then, yeah, just a bunch of different options here. You also, yeah, have electronical PSI readers, so you know if you have a flat tire or something. I honestly don't really think those are that useful, but again, if it's just your, you know, daily kind of commuter car and you don't really care that much, I guess that could be kind of useful. Now with this gear selector that comes in the automatics, it's actually kind of interesting, because so you don't pull right down to get out of park. You actually go over and then back in. That locks it in reverse. You do have your backup camera right there. Do the same thing, locks it in neutral, and then you go straight back from there to go into drive, and then flip it over to use that manual mode. And you can, you know, go up gears or down gears right here, or you can use these paddle shifters. I also really like the little GR badge on the steering wheel. I know that's, you know, nothing really significant, and I'm pretty sure on the Subaru one it has like a BRZ badge or something right there. But also the seats are really nice. This pattern, like on the cloth seats, it's kind of like ugly to look at, to be honest with you, but they really hold you in like really well. It's honestly pretty tight in here for me. I'm 6 foot, I'm like about 200 pounds, 195, around there, give or take. I do have a decent amount of head room. I think that might be a problem if you want to track it and you had to wear a helmet. I think that could be a little bit of an issue, because the seat is just like a manual seat, so you can just kind of adjust it 2 ways, so making the back go up and down, and then sliding it on the bottom. So there's not really, you know, much adjustment going on here, but I can sit around and kind of mess around with the interior stuff all day, but I'm sure you guys don't want to see this. So now I'm going to get the hood down and start driving this GR86 and share my initial thoughts. All right guys, so we do still have it in track mode, and in track mode traction control is off, and of course we are going to be driving around in the manual mode and testing out these rather kind of tiny paddle shifters. But yeah, I can tell right off the bat that I'm going to have fun with this car today. It's brand new. It has 7 miles on the odometer. Again, a huge shout out to Sanso and Toyota. But just doing some figure eights here, you can tell that it almost like immediately wants to get, yeah, you can hear the tires too. And I'm not even like pushing it that hard. So I'm gonna get out of the dealership so I don't scare off any of their customers. But it's almost like this GR86 kind of wants to kick out. It wants to get sideways. It wants to drift. So immediately, like, and even with the just naturally aspirated 4-cylinder boxer engine, it still feels like it has a decent amount of low-end torque where it could be able to, you know, just kick out when it wants to. Now, also, if you are new to my channel, my personal vehicle actually is, or my daily vehicle, I guess I should say, actually is a 2008 V6 Mustang, which makes a little bit less power than this, but my Mustang is a manual. So I'm gonna be kind of comparing this car to that driving experience as well, because very, you know, similar drivetrains, I guess you could say. One's obviously 6 cylinders, one's 4 cylinders, but this guy makes a little bit more power. It doesn't have as much torque as my Mustang, I believe. However, this GR86 does have the limited slip differential, which makes a ton of a difference when going through, you know, corners compared to the open diff on my V6 Mustang. I love the sound of this engine, or this exhaust, I should say. It honestly doesn't, I mean, it still sounds like a 4-cylinder, but it doesn't sound too raspy. It has that deep growl and that nice tone that you get with, you know, the same boxer engines in, you know, Subaru WRXs. Still pulls very, very well. I do have to say though, and you could probably have heard it from that like little first through third pull right there, that when you do shift, there's a little bit of a delay, but that's like that with most, you know, automatic vehicles. So that's just something that you'd have to get used to if you got this in an automatic. Now, is this as good as a manual? I don't think so. That's just my opinion. As like a car enthusiast, I know that term gets tossed around a lot, but as a car enthusiast, I think that, you know, getting one of these in a manual is probably your best option. That's probably what's going to be the most amount of fun. But a perfect example is, you know, Sanso and Toyota's lot right now. As of, you know, today, obviously there's cars in and out of there all the time, but as of today, this is actually the only GR86 that they have available on their lot. So I would say that if you're in the, you know, market for one of these and you've been looking at one of these for a while, and your only option is to get an automatic, or, you know, wait however several months and custom order yours from either Toyota, BRZ and get a manual. But if your only option is to get an automatic, I definitely don't think that it's a deal breaker. I think that it's still worth it. This car can still be a lot of fun. You saw me in the parking lot before, and I wasn't even, like, I was maybe going half throttle, and with the traction control off in track mode, those tires were still fighting a little bit there just to stay straight. So the car can be an absolute blast. It's something that's, you know, reliable, that you can go back and forth from, you know, work or from school in, but at the same time, you can kind of be a weekend warrior, take this thing out to a couple track days, autocross days, you know, things of that nature. And you won't completely be outclassed. I know a lot of people, you know, give the BRZ, the 86, a lot of, you know, shit and a lot of hate because they don't make that much power. But at the end of the day, there's plenty of, you know, videos out there on YouTube of these little guys, you know, keeping up with Corvettes, with Mustangs, with Camaros on, you know, different autocross events. Now, mind you, in a straight line, those cars would absolutely, you know, destroy this guy. But when it comes to corners, something like this, there's definitely not that much competition. I can maybe think of like a, you know, modern day ND Miata for I guess around the same price point. But when it comes to like starter car enthusiast vehicles, this is probably one of the cars that will give you the best bang for your buck when talking about new cars. Now, obviously the car market is incredibly inflated nowadays, and I'm sure there's, you know, better options than this guy in the used car market. I mean, you can get like a Shelby for not much more than this if you're, you know, willing to go back a couple of generations. But for around $30,000, give or take. I know some dealerships are marking up, but this is honestly really not that bad of an option. Yeah, and that exhaust note just sounds so nice. Honestly, one of the better sounding 4-cylinders that I have driven, at least on the channel, and it's naturally aspirated. Now, I know I kind of mentioned this before, but I try to do this sometimes when I'm, you know, reviewing cars, but I think hypothetically, if I were to own something like this, probably the first thing that I would do is throw in a turbo kit. It won't make a ridiculous undrivable amount of power, but instead of, you know, 220 brake horsepower, you could potentially be looking at you know, around 300 wheel horsepower, and it will make the driving experience of something like this just an absolute blast to drive. Again, that's my own opinions. If you're, you know, looking for a daily car, obviously you wouldn't want to do that, and if you're getting one of these, you know, brand new and don't want to void the warranty, then completely, you know, disregard what I'm saying. But I just think that, you know, especially after seeing the Mighty Car Mod series that they did on their BRZ, which was actually from the previous generation. It was a couple years old, but they threw on a turbo kit, and like right now I'm at full throttle right now, and it's just not really throwing me back in the seat. It's a very controllable car, but it can be a little bit boring, especially if you're not taking corners with it and you're just in a straight line. Whereas the little bit extra power that you're going to get from a turbo kit is going to make a huge difference, especially when driving this guy, you know, on a highway like, well, where I'm at right now. But anyways, that's pretty much just going to be it for today's video. If you found this informative at all, definitely be sure to leave a like, you know, subscribe, click that bell little icon down there to get notified when I post. And also, again, a huge shout out to Sansone Toyota. Their website will be linked down in the description below. I honestly love coming here. Over the past couple of years, I've done multiple of their vehicles out of their lot, and I've had nothing but good things to say about them. So again, if you are in the North Jersey or Central Jersey area, I definitely suggest checking them out if you're looking for one of these GR86s or a new Supra or whatever the case may be. But that's pretty much just gonna be it for today's video. Again, thank you guys so much for all the ongoing support, and I'll see you in the next one.